Welcome to this Masterclass Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to look at businesses not just as profit-making machines, but as complex, living structures. I want you to imagine yourself not just as an employee or a student, but as a cultural architect. In any organization, somebody has to build the company's soul. Someone has to lay the foundation for how people treat each other and construct the ethical framework that keeps the whole building from collapsing. We are going to build our knowledge up from absolute zero today, step by step. So if this is your first time diving into corporate culture, you are in the exact right place.
Here is our roadmap for this guided class. We'll start with the foundation. What even is corporate culture? Then we'll stress test it with some ethical dilemmas, zoom into local zoning, specifically the Malaysian context, and finally do some building inspections with real-world case studies.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, Foundation. What is corporate culture?
Now, you might think corporate culture is just that shiny framed mission statement in the lobby, right? Or maybe the rules printed in the employee handbook. But actually, scratch that, it's not. Corporate culture refers to the shared values, beliefs, and behaviors that truly shape how an organization operates. Most importantly, it's defined by the unwritten rules. It's what people actually do every single day when the boss isn't looking. Who gets promoted? What achievements are celebrated? And crucially, what kind of toxic behaviors get swept under the rug? It is the collective living personality of the company. So if the handbook says, hey, we value teamwork, but the unwritten rule rewards individuals who steal all the credit, well, the culture is the latter. Understanding that distinction is the absolutely fundamental first step for any cultural architect.
Okay, moving on to level 2, stress testing, ethical dilemmas.
Let me ask you this, and think about it for a second. Imagine you're an HR manager. You've got an open position, and you have to choose between your absolute best friend and a total stranger who honestly is way more qualified. What do? This brilliantly illustrates a classic conflict of interest. It's that tricky dilemma where you're torn right down the middle between personal interests and professional duties. I mean, hiring your friend might seem harmless enough to you, but think about the ripple effect. It instantly shatters the trust and morale of your entire team who are banking on a fair, merit-based system. To survive this stress test, a cultural architect has to build processes that prioritize objective integrity over personal ties, preventing situations that rot trust from the inside out.
Let's look at an even bigger stress test. In one corner, you've got economic goals, maximizing profits, slashing costs, explosive growth. But in the other corner, you have justice and fairness, equal and ethical treatment for your employees and the community. This clash happens all the time. Think about a company deciding to just relentlessly cut costs by outsourcing jobs to a place with terrible labor standards. Sure, it boosts short-term profit, maybe saves a ton of money, but it kills local jobs and raises some massive red flags about fair practices. How a company balances that intense drive for cash with its social responsibility tells you everything about its true culture. If they go for ruthless cost-cutting every single time, the unwritten rule just becomes profit at all costs. And guess what? Employees will eventually adjust their own daily ethics to match that exact ruthless standard.
So the takeaway here is that a strong corporate culture has to constantly navigate these 5 core stress tests. We just touched on conflict of interest and economic character versus fairness, but it goes deeper. You also have to manage personality traits, like how do you carefully balance an introverted employee's need for a quiet zone with a high-pressure demand for group teamwork? Then there's responsibility to stakeholders. Are you chasing quick profits for shareholders or making patient, sustainable investments? And finally, the level of openness, basically deciding how much sensitive info to actually share with the public to keep their trust. These aren't just one-and-done decisions. These 5 pillars are what organizations have to wrestle with literally every single day.
Which brings us to part 3, local zoning, the Malaysian context.
We've been talking a lot of theory, but as any architect knows, you've got to build for your specific environment, right? Historically, the traditional Malaysian corporate ecosystem places a massive emphasis on a respect for hierarchy. Decisions flow top-down, and seniority is a big deal. It's also incredibly relationship-oriented. Business deals, they run on interpersonal trust. It is totally normal for meetings to kick off with coffee and a long chat before anyone even breathes a word about business. The culture also leans heavily into collectivism, meaning the group's success comes way before individual ambition. Keeping group harmony and saving face is paramount. Plus, traditionally, it's defined by strict formality, using the right titles, honorifics, and keeping dress codes very professional.
But wow, is this landscape shifting rapidly. Today, those strict formal protocols, they're colliding head-on with modern demands for open concept offices and casual communication. That historical need for face-to-face relationship building is being seriously challenged by the reality of remote work and virtual tools.
You kind of have to build trust through a screen now. And maybe the biggest shift, that traditional top-down decision-making is clashing hard with generational differences. Younger workers are entering the market with totally different expectations. They want flat hierarchies, instant feedback, and fast career growth. So to keep the building from collapsing, companies are having to actively foster cross-generational inclusivity. They're trying to blend those deep-rooted traditions with modern agility, and it's a fascinating balancing act.
All right, time for your final exam, Part 4, Building Inspections, Real-World Case Studies.
Let's actually inspect some real-world corporate buildings to see how their cultural foundations led to either massive success or catastrophic collapse. First up, the CIMB Group. Their guiding mission is Make Dreams a Reality. And look, this isn't just some catchy PR slogan. They succeed precisely because their written mission totally aligns with their unwritten daily behaviors. CIMB boasts an award-winning culture genuinely rooted in inclusivity, collaboration, and innovation. We're talking strictly enforced non-discrimination policies and a massive focus on gender diversity at the leadership level. They actively tear down corporate silos by encouraging cross-functional teams, and they even pump resources into their dedicated innovation lab. Because their unwritten rules prioritize things like mentorship and sharing knowledge, they consistently snag huge prestigious awards like HR Leader of the Year.
Next on the inspection list is AirAsia, operating under the motto, "We care and we make it easy." Now, remember that strict Malaysian formality we just talked about? AirAsia completely throws that out the window. They've sparked a cultural revolution by fiercely prioritizing a casual, deeply fun workplace. They don't even call their staff employees. They're known as all-stars, and they're actively encouraged to bring their true, authentic personalities to work every single day. It's this vibrant, incredibly colorful environment that focuses on rapid creativity and intense teamwork. By intentionally breaking away from rigid hierarchies and actually caring about employee well-being, they built this uniquely resilient, adaptable machine that completely disrupted an entire industry.
But what happens when the foundation is rotten right from the start? For a final inspection, we have to look at the 1MDB case. 1MDB's corporate culture was built on intense, staggering secrecy. Executives operated entirely behind closed doors, almost zero public transparency, zero accountability. Instead of balancing economic goals with fairness and justice, the unwritten rule here was all about massive personal enrichment at the expense of the public. This total lack of transparency created a deeply ethics-free environment from the top down. And you know what happens then? It makes it incredibly easy for massive corruption to just take root unhindered. Ultimately, it was this specific cultural architecture of intense secrecy that played a direct, catastrophic role in the scandal that inevitably brought the whole organization crashing down.
So we've built this up from absolute zero today. We've defined what culture actually is, stress-tested it against real ethical dilemmas, mapped it onto the Malaysian environment, and finally seen it in action. Now, I want to leave you with a vital question to chew on. As a cultural architect yourself, take a look around you tomorrow. Based on the unwritten rules, not the fancy handbook, but what people actually do, who gets promoted, what gets celebrated, what kind of culture is your workplace or university truly building? Is it a vibrant, resilient foundation of trust, or is it a closed-door house of cards? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep observing and go build better cultures.